Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Get in the Herd After Hours. After Hours. I'm your host, Alex Bond. I am a administrative assistant, recovery coach trainer, and house leader here at the McShin Foundation. Get in the Herd is a recovery podcast brought to you by the McShin Foundation. And more importantly, I am a person with substance use disorder, which means I'm also in recovery from substance use disorder. And for just over a year now, I've not found the need to put any mood or mind altering substances in my body and be a contribution to society better than any other time in my entire life. I've also found a newfound identity thanks to this podcast and finding myself along this journey. I also want to say that Get in the Herd has now officially been awarded the best podcast in Richmond, which is pretty cool. So big shout out to all of our listeners and supporters and guests. It's a really impressive feat. And thank you to all that voted. And, we just love to give back. And a perfect example of that is having Meredith and Julie on today. How are you doing, ladies?
We're doing good.
We're good. Thanks for having us.
Very happy to have you on. Meredith, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and tell them a bit about yourself?
Sure thing. My name is Meredith Speir. I've never been on an After Hours podcast before, so this is super exciting.
Welcome.
Yes. I, of course, struggled with substance use for most of my 20s. I have been in recovery for, if you do the math, 11 years and 7 months to the day, actually. Nice. And thank you. It's been an amazing experience, I remember back in 2005, I was homeless, jobless, penniless, broken, all the things that go along with using. And tonight I'm on an After Hours podcast. I'm a wife. I'm a mother to a beautiful daughter. I'm a business owner. I'm back in school, and all of those things would not be possible if I had not found a pathway of recovery that works for me. So I am the co-founder and chief operating officer of the Recovery Connection. We are out here in Winchester, Virginia, which is about 70 miles west of Washington, D.C. I'm originally from Alexandria, but I came out to Winchester for treatment for my substance use disorder, and I stayed and have built a life here out in the boonies a little bit, but it's a small town feel, and I'm super excited to be here with you guys tonight.
We're very happy to have you. That's awesome. Congratulations on 11 years and 7 months. That's it's like my birthday, November 7th. So I can remember that very easily. Julie, how are you doing? Why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
Well, hello, everyone. This is my first time in the After Hours at the 9 p.m. I've been to the earlier version, but I am a person in long-term recovery as well. I'm also from out of the area. I'm from Northern Virginia. And same as Meredith, I relocated in Winchester to get clean in 2008 in April, and have not found it necessary to use since then. And I kind of just posted up, and I've never left. And I can't imagine, it's funny because I grew up in Northern Virginia, and then I came out to Winchester, and I remember going to treatment out there, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's like cows and farms, and like, where am I? And like, I can't imagine living in Northern Virginia anymore. But this journey has been absolutely incredible. Some of the highest highs and the lowest lows, right? Because that's life. I've learned to live life on life's terms, whatever is coming at me. And I've developed some of the most amazing relationships I could ever possibly imagine, with my family again, and with my friends, like my best friend and co-founder and partner, Miss Speir. And this journey's been pretty amazing. And it's, I like to say a lot of the times that like some of recovery's strangest gifts come in the most strange and difficult packages. And if you would have asked me, a few years back, if I would be invited to a podcast to talk about, what we're going to be talking about tonight, I would have probably laughed a little bit and not understood, so it's just interesting when you kind of let go and you roll with it, and you roll with life and what it brings to you and the gifts that unfold. So I'm super grateful to be here. And thanks for having us, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. Very happy to have you on. Thanks for coming on. I wanted to start off by one thing that I like talking about, since we have a lot of people on this show from different areas, especially states. Meredith, you actually mentioned, being from the boonies and quote. And what I wanted to know is if that is like an advantage to find recovery or a disadvantage, because I know it's kind of hard to find as many resources out in a little bit more rural areas, but I also think that separation from a lot of the people, the culture, and the environment can be an advantage. I was wondering if you could kind of speak on that, whether you think it's more of an advantage or a disadvantage trying to find recovery out there.
Sure. Okay, so I'm from Alexandria, which is not the boonies, right?
Okay. No.
It is a city that it's very close to Washington, D.C. So I moved to Winchester to find recovery, but that is a good question. I know in recovery, you can't just have a geographical change, right? If I'm not willing to change anything about myself, if I go move to Florida, there I am, right? But for me, it was important to relocate. I was not in early recovery strong enough to go back to Alexandria, Virginia, where I used for many, many years and, drove by the bar and the pool hall that I went to on a nightly basis. So I think that the geographical change for me was important. And two, Winchester is a recovery town. There are quite a few resources out in Winchester, and I'm sure there are in Northern Virginia as well. But for me, that geographical change was super important. I know our community here in Winchester, we have a coalition that comes together every month to fight to end the stigma and to put on different community events for people in recovery and loved ones in recovery. So Winchester's actually, even though it is a small town with a pretty small population, we have a lot of services here. Does that answer your question, Alex?
No, yeah, absolutely. I think it's a multifaceted thing. There are a lot of different variables going on there. And I'm glad you mentioned stigma. That's like our personal favorite topic on this show, and we'll definitely jump into that later. Julie, can you actually explain to me what the LLC, I think it is, Recovery Connection is?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I can actually piggyback on kind of what.
Please do.
On what
in our house, the Recovery Connection clients are on the podcast.
They are. So they just chatted, hey ladies.
Represent.
I can kind of piggyback on what Meredith was talking about, and it kind of like our motivation for why we established the model, right? So the Recovery Connection, starting out, we opened September 1st, 2018. Meredith and I have, even though we're not from Winchester, we had been in recovery, out here for a while. And so, we were able to kind of get a feel for like, okay, what's out here? What's missing? Right. And so something that we've noticed, not just in Winchester, but a lot of different places, is that you have, you've got your 28-day inpatient, right? Mm-hmm. And then you've got your sober living, Oxford houses, different things like that. So, when you think in terms of the disease and how complex it is, and especially, the prevalence of co-occurring mental health conditions and all of these things, the prevalence of trauma and a lot of the people that struggle with substance use, all of those intricacies into the disease, right? And you've got kind of two opposite sides of the spectrum on the continuum of care, right? So you've got your inpatient 28-day, then you've got sober living. And we noticed a lot, we're like, that's a huge gap. That's a huge gap on the continuum, right? And I know for me personally, Meredith can share, kind of what motivated her and how it all came about. It kind of started with a phone call between the two of us. She was seeking help for a loved one. And, I was frustrated a little bit with just the the gap in and of itself, because I myself, a person who is in a 12-step program, have buried multiple women that I worked with that were found in sober living homes, kind of that lack of oversight. And not to say that it doesn't serve its purpose. I lived in an Oxford house for 18 months, but, just kind of recognizing the need for a lot of the population to have kind of that slow transition to autonomy, right? So long story short, as we kind of were like, hey, like, let's build something. And, it's pretty cool. Sometimes every now and again, like I'll like, drive up to our house and walk in the front door. And like, there's been a couple times where I've come into the office and been like, Meredith, do you ever just like pull up and realize, like, think about how literally this came from an idea? This literally came from the ground up, we've literally built this from an idea. And so the Recovery Connection right now, today, and it's getting ready to change. So I'll just say today, is a peer-based transitional living program that serves women that struggle with substance use disorder. So for the last 2 years, we've served 7 women at a time, and we had a live-in recovery house manager who was a certified peer recovery specialist. Meredith and I are also certified peers. And so we literally kind of built the model with the intention to provide more oversight, more monitoring, more supervision, emergency preparedness, safety measures, and more programming centered around trying to kind of like, when they first come in, kind of hug them tight and get them all settled in, and then slowly let go as they phase into more independence and autonomy. And a lot of, I can't remember the exact, but there's some women that when they leave us, they go to Oxford as a step down. So it serves exactly what our intention was, I'm really wordy. I'm talking a lot, so I'll shut up in a second. But we have some really, really exciting news, because in a few weeks, we're hoping the first week of November, the last year or so, we obtained our license through the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services to become a licensed treatment facility. So the house that exists right now will be transitioning to work with Virginia Medicaid, and will be a level 3-1. So just a couple, big major changes. And then we're closing on our second home October 26th to be a step down and essentially be what we are now. So, it's really, really exciting. And Meredith and I are incredibly kind of sort of really stressed and busy. But we're super, super excited, and the support we have in the community and beyond, over in Richmond and across the state, and even people that we've met across the country, through networking. Gosh, there's just so much love and support, so much love and support. So.
No, absolutely. That's big news. So congratulations to you. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because it actually brings up, so when you have, say a business at the end of the day, just a regular business, and it decides to expand, one of the problems with it is that it delineates equality a lot of times. How do you prevent that happening, Meredith? Or you either, Julie, is how opening a second house, how do you make sure that you can still make sure to embrace and hold people tight while also providing the quality care and services that you continue to?
That's a good question. And it has been a challenge, right? I will say, Julie and I, when we started the Recovery Connection, we spent 9 months networking, going to different conferences, meeting with other treatment providers, coming down to meet with John Schinholzer. I remember we did that before we opened up, and learned, all right, what works, what doesn't work. So we really took our time with developing the program. And then we've been in this for 2 years. Really the boots on the ground. Like in the beginning, it was just Julie, myself, and a recovery house manager, We're growing slowly. So we have Abby, who is our direct care specialist, who is awesome. And then of course we're hiring more folks, but we really want to be sure that they buy into the vision and the mission of the organization. I will say, and Julie can echo this comment as well, we're in the process of hiring for the license 3.1, and we're having a heck of a time finding employees that can work there that are in recovery and they have barrier crimes. We're really struggling with that because we want to, at the 3.1, of course, bring the clinical components in, but we don't want to lose that peer-to-peer either, because both elements are important, So that's been a challenge. But I would say, going back to your question, Alex, we have really been the boots on the ground. We're very careful in terms of who we hire, just making sure that they buy into the vision and the mission at the Recovery Connection.
Yeah, that shows you care too. At the same time, again, it's not easy to find someone who is, nonviolent, or doesn't have any sort of nonviolent record, but a peer with sustained recovery time who has all these licenses. I know right now that it's not easy even finding PRSs in general, let alone someone who's probably even more licensed than a PRS. So that does show a lot of care that you all have for this. Yes, Julie.
Okay.
My son
Her
just
children are waking up.
Oh, absolutely. So one other thing, and this is kind of like a really big question. You were talking about stigma a little bit. Do you think, and I know I'm going to want Julie's opinions on this too. Do you think that women have a larger stigma in recovery than, say, men do? Because I know a lot of women who are like, oh, how could she be a drug addict and not be a mother to her kids compared to like a dad? I just think it's a little different. Could you kind of expound on that?
I 100% agree with you. I think a lot of times women, because they are women, because they are mothers, they have a hard time reaching out for help, because they're expected to take care of everything at home a lot of the times, and they have to care for their children, So addicts and people that struggle with substance use in general really have a hard time, I think, asking for help. But I would tend to agree with you that there is, I don't know if there's more of a stigma, but I would venture to say that there is with women, and women are underserved too. And obviously we started the Recovery Connection as a program for women, one, because we are women, but two, we believe that a lot of times women are definitely underserved. So, but yeah, I would agree that there's even probably more of a stigma when you're a female,
No, yeah, I agree. And I know just from my experience in the Richmond community and speaking with other people that even a lot of communities that are co-ed, there are a lot more men's houses than there are women's houses. Like we at McShin have 8 men's houses, but 3 women's houses. And we just started this program in Chesterfield where all the women are in a live-in program at the Chesterfield house. So there's less distractions and more time to really build that woman-to-woman connection, which I think can be a little harder for women than men sometimes. I think men have, I don't know. Again, it's different. I don't want to try to like compare all the differences, but I think that you put a group of men together and I think they might be more willing to get along and real quick than maybe a group of women. And I don't want to make any sort of generalization there, but I just think that there's a lot of, trust issues, eating disorders, domestic violence history that a lot of men just don't deal with.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't want to talk about like too much of the big stuff while she's gone. And I'm going to actually probably get her opinions on that as well.
Cool.
What has your growth? How have you been able to see the Recovery Connection grow in the last 2 years? Because it's been almost exactly 2 years now. Has there been a lot of data to support why you should open up a new house? A lot of trial and error? Like what were some of the obstacles that maybe you came across in that first 2 years?
Sure. So when we opened on September 1st of 2018, we had one client. Wow. So we had one client the date that we opened. So of course we were a bit nervous, right? I want to say the house was full first or second week in October. We are big on looking at the data, right? So we have clients, we meet with clients weekly. We are all about getting their feedback and their insight. Hey, if we're doing something and you feel like we should do it a different way, just come to us and let us know. But we looked at the data, and that is the reason that we wanted to get licensed and launch the 3.1, because our data showed that, gosh, I would venture to say 95% of our clients had some clinical care. So we were outsourcing all of that. And the CSB here, Northwestern Community Services Board, they are phenomenal. They provide tons of services for our clients. But Julie and I started to look at the data, and we said, if this is what they need, why don't we do that? So it took a really long time, but just going back to that, so many of the clients that we serve, the peer-to-peer element is awesome, but most of them, benefit from the clinical component as well. I believe we've provided services to about 65 women since we've been open. We saw when COVID first happened, our census dropped really low. But about a month into COVID, we've been operating at pretty much full capacity since about April of this year. So, and of course, when we grow, we'll have 8 client beds at the licensed treatment facility and then 7 client beds at the step down. But we're all about data and looking at the data and basing what we do on that data.
Yeah, I think the data-driven and evidence-supported is vital. I also think that I'm biased. I've never had treatment before, so I'm definitely a huge proponent of peer support, but I've seen most of the greater success rates come from those that have both, like have had some sort of treatment and then come into a peer support realm. Julie, Debbie Rosenbaum asked if you could actually talk about VAR and its importance in this whole process or just in general.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to apologize. A single mom life, I have a 6-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old son. And when I was texting with Meredith before, and I was like, oh my gosh, like what if my kids wake up, which is why I'm kind of like talking like this, but anyways, so
no, it's cool. You're an awesome human. Like that's even more important. I'm glad that happened.
It's after hours. You're supposed to whisper anyway, so it's good.
I'm usually in bed. Have we talked about VAR at all? Has VAR been mentioned yet?
No, it is not. Debbie just asked about it, and I thought you'd be a perfect person to bring it to light.
Cool. So when we opened in September of 2018, we learned about VAR, which is obviously the state affiliate for the National Alliance for Recovery Residences, because we knew we wanted to develop this model. We knew it was going to be, a recovery home. And so we were like, wow, this is awesome. This is a whole, rack of standards that would kind of like if because what we were about quality. We wanted to provide quality services, recovery support services, and so it went perfectly in alignment with what we learned about VAR, and we've been connected with some really awesome people out of that. And so we went through the process of the accreditation, and at that time, I believe that there was 4 or 5 other organizations, and they were all in Richmond. And so it was really, really exciting for us to kind of be pulling that out here in the Northern Shenandoah Valley. And so, moving forward for us, it's not only, it provides a level for Meredith and I, this knowing that like we're in alignment with our mission, with knowing that, through the accreditation, that not only do we know we're operating, with providing the highest standards, but other people are seeing that too. And we want to communicate that with the people that we're, communicating, like talking to and reaching out to and networking with, that like, hey, through this accreditation, like you can know and feel safe that like we hold ourselves to the highest standards that exist through VAR. And so now when you're incorporating, the licensed home too, which is pretty cool, NAR and VAR, they have different levels, levels 1, 2, 3, 4, depending on what kind of services or what your particular recovery residence provides. And so, we aim to be shifting, for our 3-1 licensed home to a level 4 because it's clinical. There'll be clinical components. And then our step down will be a level 2, which we've been. So, accreditation, quality, it's, Meredith and I's mission is to, I will say that, the population that we've served over the past 2 years, Meredith and I have seen, people that kind of are set up with a lack of resources and not really set up in a way to where they're set up for success. They don't have the resources, they don't have the access, they don't have the funding. And seeing everybody is human. Everybody is human. Everybody is deserving of the same quality care and the same services as anybody else. And so, for Meredith and I, it is our heart and our mission to be able to provide that quality care at, with the highest standards, no matter who we're serving, no matter where you come from, what your socioeconomic status is, and so that's the driving force that keeps us fighting for, through our advocacy, through development and growth of the business, just through being in recovery, and through VAR too, So I don't know if that answers the question or not, but
No, absolutely. It's definitely I think VAR holds up to a certain standard, and it not only legitimizes in terms of like keeping people safe and comfortable. Very simply, also, it's a way to show, because a lot of these people are 20 somethings with parents who want to make sure that their kid is getting the best care that they possibly could, and a VAR certified house helps that in a very easy way, I think, too. And you expounded even more on that. I did want to just to switch gears a little bit, Meredith. You mentioned your pathway to recovery is how you explained it. I was wondering if you could talk about that in general. So is Recovery Connection open to multiple pathways? I know that some places are very faith-based, some places are anti-MAT, and I was just kind of wondering if Recovery Connection is multiple pathway and maybe your personal pathway to recovery.
Sure. So absolutely, the Recovery Connection is, hi, Rye. Absolutely, the Recovery Connection. We accept all pathways to recovery, right? So, of course, the clients are required to go to outside meetings outside of the program. But we want them to do whatever works for them, right? So we don't say you got to go to this 12-step meeting and you got to go to this church and you got to do it this way, right? We accept all pathways, 12-step, SMART recovery. We've had a handful of clients that have really utilized and enjoyed SMART recovery, which meets, I think, twice weekly here, at least in the Winchester area. Celebrate recovery, the faith-based route, even going to, just any sort of mutual aid support group, like even if a grief support group is what someone needs to go to because they've experienced the loss of a loved one. We are all about the clients choosing their pathway to recovery. We are MAT friendly, so we do accept clients on methadone and Suboxone. I believe we are the only place in Winchester for residential that does that. So, Julie and I, when we were developing the Recovery Connection, we once again looked at the data, right? And methadone and Suboxone, of course, decrease mortality rates, assist folks that struggle with substance use with cravings. And we've seen people recover and be on MAT. So we are MAT friendly. My personal pathway to recovery started in the 12-step fellowship and is still in the 12-step fellowship today. But of course, I also do, some spiritual things that absolutely aid me in my recovery. But really, when I walked in the door, on day one of getting clean, I wasn't ready to go to church and have this religious pathway to recovery. That wasn't my pathway on day one,
Mhm.
but it's changed over time for sure. But yeah, definitely 12-step. I still go to meetings at least once a week, and it has definitely worked for me thus far. So I'll keep doing it.
Absolutely. I think there's a very big difference between religious and spiritual, especially when it comes to recovery. And Robert Legg actually has a pretty good question for you, too. If you could speak about what specifically are the local CSB doing that helps your program the most, and what would you like to see CSB do more of to support recovery?
That's a
Either
great
one of y'all
question.
can take that. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you want to try, Julie, or is the other child going to wake up?
Well, they both have woken up already. So I'm really sorry, Alex. This is
Bring them on.
So the question is, how this, okay, got it. Thank you. Okay, awesome. So, those 9 months that Meredith was talking about when we were networking and going to conferences and just getting to know people, getting to know the climate in the field and just kind of feeling everything out, we were connected with our local CSB. And, obviously we're a little bit biased because we have our CSB, they obviously we know the best because they're who we work with directly, but they were amazing. They right off the bat know and buy into and practice the importance of the peer element, of recovery. And so they kind of like right from the get were super supportive of what we were trying to do. And so we have a contract with them where in the event that somebody may not have the funding sources to, pay for their program fees at our program, and if they fall into our catchment area, so if they reside in the counties that our CSB serves, they can potentially be funded up to 90 days through our program. And I would say
awesome.
a large majority of the people that we serve are funded by the CSB. And I, personally, like Meredith and I have worked with a lot of different CSBs. Like that's one thing, we just reach out to all of them all over the state. I know Rappahannock, Rapidan, they've been incredible, super supportive. They're out in like the Culpeper, Warrenton area. And so we have some great relationships with other CSBs across the state. And so I, for one, I would love to see more of that, like more coming together and, more of like just everybody kind of, and of course I know based on, because essentially they're funded in part, by government money and all that good stuff. And so, in some cases, we have what we have and we got to work with what we've got. But, just this, the attitude of understanding the complexity of the disease and the importance of the peer-to-peer element and being able to kind of advocate for finding ways to help assist through funding and things like that, the peer-based services too is great. So, it's been awesome, but I really, I've got nothing but great things to say about CSBs and our experience, across the board, not just with Northwestern, ours, but Rappahannock, Rapidan, and all kinds of others, Loudoun County. We've just had really great relationships with these places. So.
That's good. And it's not always easy to foster those relationships when you're working within the type of parameters that you were talking about, Julie, is you kind of have to play the bureaucracy. You have to play the game every now and then. And it can't always be easy when you have to get what you need for these people. Meredith, I was wondering if you could actually speak on some of the actual advocacy work that you've done. I heard you made a recent trip to a specific residential area. If you all would like to talk about that.
Okay, so Alex, I'm gonna have to say that I saw that the ad on the Miction page earlier today, and it said we both went to the White House. I have bad news. I didn't go to the White House, but
Julie did. That's what you're insinuating.
Julie did, And I was with her there in spirit. I stayed back and was at the Recovery Connection program. I have joined in. Julie, I'm sure will speak a little bit more about her advocacy efforts. I mean, at the root of that is she lost her husband 11 days after we opened the Recovery Connection. So I have joined forces with Julie, but I'm going to turn this question over to Julie because I was not at the White House.
Please, Julie, what was it like?
Well, I wanted her to come, but she is such a hard worker and believes so much in the Recovery Connection that she had to stay back and keep boots on the ground. And, you know, a lot of the times when people ask about my advocacy, like even though Meredith may not physically be with me to all my Richmond trips, my DC trips, and all of that, it is me and her that are doing this. And it's important that everybody knows that, you know, when people talk about, you know, and I can speak on this here shortly in the passing of Danny's Law, which was, you know, my late husband, and that was passed last general session, is, you know, I'll say that Meredith and I passed it. You know, because if it weren't for her, there's no way that I could be able to take off to Richmond on a whim when I get a call from, you know, one of the senator's legislative aides saying like, hey, we need you on committee tomorrow. You know, there's just no way. Like if it wasn't for her, the bill wouldn't have been passed because I wouldn't have been able to be there. So she is an advocate, whether she fully buys it or not. And I've dragged her to lobby with me, which I think she liked. So
I did.
Yeah. But yes, so yeah, I was at the White House. So it was kind of cool. I got a call. So, you know, gosh, how do I even explain how this came about? You know, when I said in the very beginning, some of the greatest gifts come in the most jacked up packages. I
Absolutely.
would cuss normally, but we're not going to do that tonight. So, you know, I did, you know, I lost my husband and father of my children on 9/11, 2018, 11 days after we opened the Recovery Connection. You know, I don't think anything can prepare you for something like that. You know, you see it around being in recovery. You know, you're in a recovery community. You see people losing people, you lose friends, you lose, you know, but for me, it was just always that like, oh, that won't happen to me. You know, like it's just, you can't prepare for it. And in the darkest, most difficult time of my entire life has come the most beautiful transformation and happenings of things just kind of unfolding before me that I don't even think anybody could really dream up, you know? And when I say, you know, you just kind of let go and roll, is, you know, like what I've learned is to just speak my truth and share my heart, and things happen. And, you know, so over the course of the past 2 years, I've been introduced with, just by telling the truth, just by telling the truth, sharing Danny's stories, you know, Danny's story, my story, everything that's happened. Just by doing that, people have come into my life. You know, people have said, hey, you need to meet so and so, you need to meet so and so. And so long story short, you know, I've met a lot of people out of Richmond in the state legislatures, but I've also met some people at the federal level too. And I've come to become, you know, friends with a couple people out of the Office of National Drug Control Policy, one of which is a gentleman by the name of Tom Murphy. He was a Virginia State police officer whose son died of an overdose. And he now works under President Trump in ONDCP, and I have gotten to know him through another mutual friend, Tom Carr, out of ONDCP. Long story short, and I've just really developed relationships with these people, and but heartfelt relationships connected by purpose and pain and real raw truth and love. And so, you know, like I said, when you share your heart and speak your truth, things happen. And I got a call Actually, it was like 2 days before the event, and I had already gotten to meet Director Jim Carroll, who's the director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy, and he is incredible. His sincerity and his genuineness towards wanting to help the next person that's struggling is so real, and you can sense that in his presence. You can sense that when you get in front of somebody,
I've heard only positive things about
Yeah.
him from people like yourself.
You can't fake energy, right? You can't fake it. So when I was able to actually sit down with him across the table and he grabbed my hands and he said, "We're going to make sure that nobody ever forgets Danny." I knew it and I believed him. And I didn't know when or how or what, but I could feel it. I could feel it. And I got a call and Tom Murphy called me and he said, "Hey, Julie." He was like, "Hey, what are you doing on Thursday?" I was like, "Oh, I got, what's going on?" So it was a roundtable discussion for, talking about employing people in recovery to kick off National Recovery Month. And so, I was invited and it was a pretty awesome experience. I got to meet, Patty McCarthy with Faces and Voices of Recovery. I got to meet so many other, leading advocates and people in the industry who are also in long-term recovery. The First Lady of North Dakota, she was incredible. She and I still talk, and I've kept in touch with a lot of people. And so, I think what I drew from that experience was how, I remember Meredith saying, like, "Julie, you didn't even seem nervous," because I was petrified. I was petrified walking up to the Secret Service office, I'm like, "Oh my God." But like when Tom Murphy met me and then I was able to, sit down with people that were just like me, everybody was in recovery, and then I'm sitting across the table with the First Lady and the Surgeon General and the director of ONDCP, and like they were just people. They were just people that care about helping this epidemic and saving lives and really wanted, like, so for me it was like, gosh, like this is real, and so that was a spiritual experience for me, was just recognizing, like people on TV and people in all these high, positions and all of this. It's very intimidating when you watch it on TV or you hear it in the radio. But like when you get in front of them and you realize, and you're sitting across the table eating lunch with somebody who lost their son from an OD, no matter whether they're working in the White House or not, you connect. And, that's what this is all about, right? This is all about connection. And so it was a really, really cool experience for sure.
No, that's wonderful. And as you've probably seen Johnny Fab pop up every now and then, he's a huge advocate for like nothing about us without us. So it's really important to have someone such a great steward in yourself literally at the table with them having these conversations. So we really appreciate all that work that you do. Likewise, Meredith, they're in spirit, maybe not there every single time because someone's got to run the house. But I also wanted to ask. So, Julie, I had the great fortune of helping advocate. I was still with McShin at the time, but I remember a lot of people from the Chris Atwood Foundation were also advocating for Danny's law now, not bill. So congratulations on that. And it was one of the better experiences of my first year in recovery. But I did want to ask, maybe not to be, a skeptic or anything like that, but there were great laws such as that were passed, but a lot of people don't even know that law has been passed. So I was gonna, Meredith, how do we talk about that stuff? I feel like a lot of these important laws get passed and then people continue to think it's not a law. So then they continue to do these poor behaviors, like the Good Samaritan law. I still know plenty of people who don't know that you can call 911 and not get in trouble, or you're using buddy, because it's just not put in the paper. It's not in the media enough. So like, how can we help that? Or if you could just expound on that a little bit.
That's a great question. And I remember
Thank
when
you.
Danny's Law was passed, thinking, okay, how is everyone going to find out about
Exactly.
this? All of these laws. Honestly, on our end as recovery advocates, we need to keep talking about it. We need to keep spreading the word. We need to keep educating and making people aware. I remember when the Safe Reporting Act was passed, the Recovery Connection posted on our social media outlets because people don't know. You don't know what you don't know, right? And Julie and I were actually working on some marketing videos to talk through these laws that Julie has been a big part of helping to get passed, and you too, Alex, to educate people because you don't know what you don't know. And we've got to keep being on the front lines and educating, advocating, and just keep talking about it. But that is a really good question because I wonder, like, okay, so this happens, now what?
Yeah, because I've seen even our CEO Honesty and Nathan, who helped advocate that day as well. You can write as many correspondence of the days as you want, but a blurb that's about this big that gets in the paper like once a week just isn't enough. I feel like not enough people look at that. So it's kind of like, how do we establish relationships also with journalists and media? Because throughout this conversation, I've heard y'all say that it's very important to network and foster these relationships with your VARs, your CSBs, your ONDCPs. But I think that's also a really, really important relationship. So, Julie, while you were preoccupied, I was talking with Meredith about the stigma of, surprisingly enough, of moms in recovery. So I was wondering, moms and women in recovery, and was wondering if you could speak on that as well a little bit, and if you think women have a harder time in recovery than, say, men do because of that extra stigmatization.
That's an interesting question. I don't know about this stigma per se, but I do know that there's significantly more barriers, if you will, for women or moms seeking recovery, right? Because if they're moms, they're usually, if somebody is in need of treatment, how are you going to go to treatment when you have to take care of your babies? So there's a lot more challenges that moms typically face. I'm not saying that there aren't single dads out there, because I'm sure there are, and I know there are. But just generally speaking, a lot of the times the female population is tough because a lot of them are moms and they don't have access and funding for childcare to be able to attend, PHP or aftercare groups or, all of these resources that may be available. But it's navigating transportation, all of these different things. So, but as far as the stigma, I'm not quite sure. I don't know if it's kind of like, just for me, I've just always been somebody that's so wide open that I might be blinded if I'm, being stigmatized or judged, or, because I'm, this is my story, but I do know that in regards to, accessing resources and having, abilities to, go to treatment when treatment might be available, it's difficult for women.
Absolutely, especially those like moms in recovery in housing, because I know that's a thing, but it's a very rare thing, is having houses with say even pregnant moms in recovery. We've had a couple here at the McShin Foundation,
For sure.
and it's not easy, but being as open-minded as possible is cool. And I also commend you for your positivity, because I think maybe I'm so cynical. I see stigmatization and judgments like everywhere, and that could be part of my disease and my insecurity. So kudos to you for being positive. Debbie Rosenbaum has a good question too. What are your feelings on the importance of family support? If you wanted to take that, Meredith.
Sure thing. I think it's super important. Now, I will be fully transparent, with the population that we serve and some of the clients that walk through the doors of the Recovery Connection, they don't have many family by their side, for emotional support, for financial support. So a lot of times we are their family initially,
Absolutely.
Not to say that, if somebody stays in recovery, a lot of times the family unit can be worked on and things can be worked through with therapy, typically. But we think family support is critical. Julie has done family meetings with the clients that have requested it at the Recovery Connection, because this disease does not just affect the one that's using. It affects the entire family. And I know that because I'm in recovery from substance use, but I've also been on the other side of that with a loved one that struggled for a long time. And by the grace of God is clean today, which is awesome. But I've been on both sides, and it's super important to have family involvement if the person has family that should and are in a position to be involved. But a lot of people, don't have anybody when they walk in the doors of the Recovery Connection. So family support is critical. But a lot of times we are their family initially, which we're totally cool with being their family initially. Forever.
Absolutely. Julie, I wanted to ask on kind of on top of that, as Meredith was touching on, is I'm a pretty big proponent that trauma is a part of this disease as well. And it comes with a lot of co-occurring disorders. I am aware that you also had an eating disorder at the same time, and was wondering, say, how trauma, co-occurring mental illness, eating disorders, how that plays a factor, and what you might be able to say to people who are struggling with that as well.
Sure. Well, I'm an open book. And I think that, quite honestly, I don't think it's talked about enough in the recovery community, all of these different ways that the disease can manifest itself, right? For me, it could be an eating disorder. For somebody else, it could be compulsive sex. For somebody else, it could be gambling. For somebody else, it could be X, Y, and Z. And then, going further than that, a lot of the times too, from a clinical perspective, a lot of the times somebody's mental health might be the primary diagnosis, if you will, whether it's clinical depression or it's generalized anxiety or it's post-traumatic stress disorder. And the substance use can be the secondary. It's their coping mechanism with the mental health diagnosis.
Or even like a symptom. I know. Yeah.
Totally. And so, respecting and acknowledging the uniqueness of each individual, granted, of course, we all have similarities. We all come together, as people in long-term recovery. There's this automatic unspoken bond, right? It's like, Alex, like, we may not have, we don't kick it on a regular basis, but like, knowing you're in recovery, and we may come from different places, different walks of life, but like, there's just this unspoken thing, and that's such a gift. On the other end of that too, also recognizing the uniqueness of the individual, and the barriers that someone has, maybe facing in regards to their mental health. With Danny, my late husband, he battled bipolar disorder, and I have never been diagnosed. I do not have it, but I watched him, I watched him struggle for years. I watched him, really, really go into those phases of depression, very, very deep. And, like, being able to tell how much he didn't want to be in that place, and recognizing, I think kindness and love is kind of, I don't mean to sound so like cheesy, but I really do think, I think we're moving away as an industry of, this kind of like zero tolerance, like, get it together or you're out kind of thing, because we're kind of starting to understand what drugs do to the brain, and how much damage it can do and how long it can take to really begin to repair itself, and all the complexities and all the intricacies. But I think for me, no matter what pathway you've chosen that is working for you, for me, like, I'll be transparent. I've sought clinical services over the course of my recovery. I have been pretty much in therapy, for an extended period of time throughout. I've actually been to inpatient treatment with 14 months clean for my eating disorder, because I almost lost my life due to the bulimia. So, I think just kind of going back to what we've been talking about it, being open, being loving with one another, being kind to one another, like giving ourselves a break, and I've always been very, very open about it out here in Winchester, about being in recovery from an eating disorder, because I know it's kind of this hush hush thing. We don't really want to talk about it. And it's, I'm like, no, like, no, like, I want people to know that I've struggled and I do struggle. And it's an ongoing daily thing for me, just like the drugs and the alcohols, because I want, people to feel like they can come to me, and that they're not alone. So.
No, that's great. It takes a lot of courage. I'm not nearly as open, so I really appreciate it. Meredith, before we wrap up, Johnny Fab had a good question, kind of touches on pathways to recovery that we were talking about earlier. Is your recovery community in your area inclusive of those that use drugs or more abstinence-based? I know that MAT is kind of considered a little bit of that former in his question. And personally, I know people who smoke weed every day because it's prevented them from putting a needle in their arm for 25 years. So that's maybe not my pathway to recovery,
right.
But I know that it is one, and was just, I guess, wondering your thoughts on that, at least in your community.
In our community, I mean, I think we have both, right? Some are zero tolerance, but we're trying to, and the coalition heads up a lot of these efforts to have folks, have access to methadone and Suboxone, Vivitrol, et cetera. So I do feel, and at the Recovery Connection, we will work with someone that has a lapse. Not always, but if we see that the person, is willing and wanting to put together some sort of a commitment contract, okay, fall down 7 times, get up 8. What can we do to help you? Because let's get real, like, zero tolerance doesn't work for most folks. By the grace of God, like, we've all been clean for X amount of time. But I've seen people struggle. So I think we have both in our community, access to both. But I know at the Recovery Connection, we try to work with people when they do slip up or when they do lapse, because honestly, discharging them from a program at 1:00 in the morning when they've just recently used and probably have more drugs on them, is that what is safest for that person? Probably not. Now, of course, we've got to take lots of things into consideration as well, like the safety of that person and the other members of the house. But like, at the end of the day, zero tolerance, not everyone walks in the door, finds a pathway to recovery, and stays clean for 25 years. That's just not what the data shows. So we need to start working people. And like Julie said, at the end of the day, kindness, love, empathy, compassion, that's what works.
No, absolutely. I think a lot of people as intelligent and compassionate as yourself can think and see in the macro, in the, one size does not fit all, bigger picture. How much are these actions going to contribute to them? If someone's having a lapse or a psychotic break, you don't want to just send them on the street and say, you're not ready. I think that's for people to determine themselves.
Sure.
So we're just hitting the hour mark right now. I was wondering if, Julie, if you had any other final thoughts?
Oh, I just, I don't know. I'm just kind of sitting here in gratitude. And like I said, this came from an idea a little over 2 years ago. And just the journey that we've been on so far and the people we've gotten to meet, like yourself, Alex, and congratulations to McShin for the #1 podcast. That's awesome. Shout out to my buddy Nathan Mitchell over at McShin. Love that guy. And Cricket and everybody. And we're all in this together. And it's just a really, really an awesome, beautiful journey. And it's got its darkness, right? But we can find the light in it if we choose to. So
absolutely. Yeah, big shout out to Nathan. Nathan's my dog.
we love that guy.
Any other lasting thoughts, Meredith? Final words?
Oh gosh, no. Like Julie said, I'm just filled with gratitude. Nowhere in my life would I think I would be doing this, and I'll tell you, being in recovery and being the co-founder and the chief operating officer of the Recovery Connection this has been the most rewarding 2 years of my life. It is so heartwarming when the light bulb starts to go off, and people start to buy in and find a pathway that works for them. But yeah, shout out to all our Richmond friends, our VAR friends. And thank you guys so much for having us on tonight. We really appreciate it.
Oh, no, we really appreciate y'all. It's wonderful to see so much passion for compassion, humility, intelligence. It's just been an absolute delight having you on, and thank you for being as open and transparent as you've been. Y'all are a great team, and it shines when y'all are together. So I really appreciate that. Todd, thank you. That our producer Todd, big shout out. Always stays crushing it. Meredith, Julie, it's been a delight, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
That sounds good.
This has been Getting the Herd After Hours. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye, guys.
I am the CEO of the McShin Foundation and a woman in long-term recovery since May 27, 2007. I have not used drugs or alcohol. Woo woo! Thank you so much to the Richmond Times-Dispatch and all of our voters for Get in the Herd podcast. Those podcasts are amazing. Not only has it helped thousands upon thousands of people in their recovery, as well as family members, but it has helped me in my personal recovery. I get to listen to them now in my car through Spotify and iHeartRadio. And it's just really, really important for us to be innovative in the addiction field and the recovery community. So when COVID hit, we had to be innovative. We really had to think of what can we do to reach people that cannot go to 12-step meetings, smart recovery, faith-based, whatever, that we're shutting down constantly. So we were innovative here at McShin. Let's start podcast. So with Todd, John, Alex, and some other staff, we all just kind of jumped in who can do what. And with Todd's lead and John's lead, the podcasts have been amazing, and we're still doing them today. So I want to thank you for all of your votes and all of your energy and all of your support of our mission of healing families and saving lives. Thanks.
Tired of waiting, lost while I'm sitting at home. Dream of a new destination, lust for something unknown. Oh, you better leave it alone. I'd rather get up and go. How long can I lie around No ceiling, no crown, no pressure gonna hold me down. No stopping till I break every rule. No limits to what I can do. No, well, it's too far away. No border gonna stand in my way. No wall that I can't break through. No limits to what I can do.